The marchers wanted land and felt they were being cheated by the president. They were determined to march on the palace to remind Mrs. Aquino of her promises. What they got was rifle fire by the Marines, at first into the air, then directly into the crowd. The result was devastating. Shooting went on for 5 minutes. The marchers fell dead and wounded or fled in panic. When the firing stopped, a dozen people had been killed, nearly 100 wounded. The commander of the security forces, Major General Montano, defended his actions. He blamed demonstrators for provoking the clash. The government spokesman said 3 soldiers were wounded by bullets, and they had the right to defend themselves. Leftists condemned the shooting. Crispin Beltran, leader of the largest and most militant labor movement, called it a brutal massacre. President Aquino set up an immediate investigation and went on television to broadcast to the Philippine nation.
I am shocked over the bloody incident at Mendiola and deeply saddened at the lives that were lost. The persons responsible for this tragedy, whichever side they belong to, will be held to the fullest account.
President Aquino set up the commission because she said she was psychologically shocked by the violence during the demonstration. Her spokesman added that the Marines who opened fire, killing and injuring more than 100, will no longer be allowed to protect the police during marches. He also said that Aquino promised to punish those responsible for the deaths of the demonstrators. The military, in a rare admission, acknowledged they overreacted. They also blamed a lack of dialogue between the marchers and security troops for the shootings. Criticism from the Peasant Union was harsh. They held Aquino and her army accountable for the deaths. The spokesman also accused Aquino of being no better than the president she deposed.
She said Malacanang was for the people, but she has consistently refused Malacanang for the peasants. Where are the peasants? Are not the peasants the majority of the people? The peasants are peace-loving, and yet, when we had asked for land, they answered us with bullets. We asked for justice, they answered us with guns.
150,000 people packed a local soccer stadium to greet President Aquino as she wound up a 4-day tour to drum up support for constitutional change. The Filipino people will vote on reforms in a national referendum to be held early next month. Mrs. Aquino was given a warm welcome by the crowd. Only too aware of the national outrage over the recent killing of 12 protesters during a demonstration in Manila, Mrs. Aquino promised justice for the victims' families.
I was very concerned and very disturbed about this incident. I formed a commission to investigate what happened in this very tragic incident.
The Presidential Commission investigating the killings is due to release its report on the 6th of February. Meanwhile, Army Chief Fidel Ramos has replied to his reported comments that the troops involved overreacted.
That headline, that front page story, was taken out of context. The new armed forces of the Philippines shall adhere to and implement the existing policy of maximum tolerance.
At Manila's Mount Carmel Church, they had planned to celebrate President Aquino's birthday today. Instead, they offered mass for the victims shot dead by her troops. 20 peasants are now known to have died when Marines opened fire on a farm workers' demonstration last Thursday. The Mendiola massacre, as it's become known, has shocked the Philippines and shattered its fragile stability. As families grieved publicly over the dead, left-wing groups were preparing for a massive march of indignation. Tomorrow, they'll be carrying the real coffins. Police are still on standby in Manila, and the president has ordered an independent inquiry to find out just why the military failed to heed the instruction so clearly marked on their riot shields. At a rally in the southern city of Rojas, Aquino promised justice and appealed for calm. But as she campaigned for a big yes vote in next week's crucial referendum on her new constitution, she admitted attempts to rattle her government could intensify. The woman who was swept into office by people power still has great popular support, though the killings may have damaged her credibility. While her supporters wished her a happy 54th birthday, her opponents sang only in cynicism. In Quezon City today, loyalists of ex-President Marcos burned copies of her new constitution. It seems more political factions from both right and left are joining forces to march under the Vote No banner.
This march was held in protest against what's become known as the Mendiola massacre, when troops opened fire on demonstrators near the presidential palace, killing 12. And the authorities were anxious to avoid any repetition. President Aquino defied her advisers to allow the marchers to approach the palace, though she herself didn't make an appearance. The protesters sang songs better known for the uprising against former President Marcos. One spokesman said, "There's no future under Mrs. Aquino." Among those linking arms at the front of the march was a group of cabinet ministers. They acted as a human shield between the protesters and security forces under orders to exercise maximum restraint. The troops finally pulled back as the march drew close to the palace. Both the Philippines' largest left-wing group and its biggest trade union took part, along with several student groups. The security arrangements for the march were settled beforehand in a meeting between Mrs. Aquino and the march organizers. After peacefully but forcefully making their point, the demonstrators dispersed without incident, and the military red alert was over.
Nothing, just what they call this, countersign. Countersign. Come on.
The situation is well in hand. People should keep calm. Our troops, responding with exemplary speed, thwarted the attempt of certain groups of misguided military personnel to seize key installations.